Good evening, everyone, and you're very welcome to the book plug. Tonight we're talking about The Pain Habit with Drew Coverdale, and he has also brought Geoff along to discuss his book. Throughout this evening, we would welcome if you could put any questions in the chat box. And we will also stop the recording towards the end of the session if people want to have a discussion. The Footsteps Festival is a festival for people living with pain and celebrating the opportunities that people living with pain can have to live a better life alongside their pain. The book plug is an important part of the festival, but there are lots of other events and opportunities on our website, so please go and check it out. We're just getting a link put in the chat. We would also really appreciate if you do enjoy the session tonight, please go on to our Just Giving page to support the festival. And no amount is too small. So it is my great pleasure to kick off tonight's book plug proper. Tonight we welcome Drew along, who is a physiotherapist, a lecturer and an author. The Pain Habit is a wonderfully sized and accessible read. And I'm really keen to hear more, Drew. So if you'd like to tell us what motivated you to write this book.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks very much for inviting me. But like you said, I'm a physio, and physio 25 years. And so I've worked out approximately, I've sat down in front of people and asked them about their pain about 75,000 times. Now, it doesn't mean my ideas on pain are the final voice. I've got lots more learning to do, but there was a point after about 20 years, I really struggled to help people with persistent pain. And working in conventional outpatient practice, those patients don't really end up at my door. And through the time that I worked in the NHS, there was always a subcategory that you could help in the short term, but you always had to accept, and so did they, that they were going to have to live with this pain. And I actually observed a technique about four and a half years ago. It was a talking therapy, and I was quite skeptical about that even having any potential at all to help someone with persistent pain. And I recognised that was probably due to my own bias and biomedical training, I suppose. But I almost pushed myself to go just to sit and watch. And the technique kind of, it was like a light bulb moment for the patients in pain. It seemed to turn their pain off. And I was so fascinated by it, I went to watch it again and again. 3 different trainers delivering the same training, and each was producing the same results. Now, I wondered how I could fit that into my practice. So what I would do is see people who had a presentation that they'd come to physio for, and if they mentioned a chronic pain, I would suggest to them, does this talking technique, and would they be interested? And I started to get results with it, just like I was observed. And it puzzled me, how is it possible? Because the only thing that's changing in that moment is perception, because we were simply talking. And I used it for a few months, and I actually wrote to Lauren Mosley. For those who don't know Lauren Mosley, Professor Lauren Mosley, he's kind of the most high-profile pain neuroscientist in the physiotherapy profession. I wrote him this email, said, look, I'm halfway around the world, I'm a man in a little clinic, and I don't understand why this is happening. And maybe it's something, if you come across, it's something to research, quite naively. But he did reply. He said, it's amazing. He said, it sounds so exciting, but I get 100 of these a month. And he says, I'm sorry to pour water on your kind of idea. I said, listen, I replied again saying, you haven't poured water on any ideas. I've just had an email back from the most eminent pain scientist in my profession. I said, I'm buzzing. And we had a bit of banter, but I did realise that he said, you need an RCT, you need blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I realised, no, that's not for me. But I approached Cormac, so Professor Cormac, who's a big friend of this organisation, an amazing speaker. And I sent him some videos of this technique. And I said, what do you think of this? He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm talking to these people. He said, what the hell are you saying? And so we've done a little research study on it. So what fascinated me was that the change can be immediate. And we all know from speaking to people that there's some read a book and feel the change. Some people see one person and change. We know others just don't change. So my fascination with pain kind of lit from that moment. Yes, we did some research with Cormac, and we do some more on the same technique, a larger study in the new year, and we're going to be recruiting for that. But as part of that journey over the last 4 years, I realized that there's more behaviors that contribute to pain, but it isn't the person's fault for those behaviors. And there's always the idea that it's someone's fault or there's someone to blame. Well, if we push that to the side a little bit and just say these behaviors are habitual and invisible and are actually encoded as safety measures in the early part in life, but once they're overused, they actually create pain. So the things that bring us all our success in life, bring us our pleasure, create our pain. So once I started to study that, and I recognized that, yes, you can have a technique that helps someone in the moment, and that's fascinating and amazing when it happens and someone's had pain for 20 years and walks out pain-free. But it's just as amazing to help someone find that. It's like giving someone a fishing rod rather than the fish.
Yeah.
Giving someone the fish is like it's for your ego. Oh, I've done this amazing thing. Well, that's lovely, but that doesn't last for you. And sometimes it doesn't last for the patient because the behaviors creep in again. So if you present the idea where there's a way out of this, and you do it with a real belief that they haven't seen before, because I didn't have it. I didn't have that belief. But I have the belief now. As a 52-year-old man, it's been quite liberating to my career to think, well, it still won't help everyone, because it doesn't. Because we've all got to knock on the door when we're ready. The information to help people has probably been around for long before we had medicine and tablets. But the focus on those mechanisms to block pain and create this illusion that we don't have the ability to help ourselves, it's something that in generations to come, we'll look back and think, oh my word, they used to give out tablets for that. They used to do surgery for that. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for tablets and surgery, and modern medicine is amazing, as we all know. But I think we've lost sight of what we can do for ourselves, even in the darkest of situations. It may need someone to help us along the way. My experience of pain and kind of understanding what helped me recover from it, kind of 2 or 3 years ago, when I thought I knew it all intellectually, actually was the catalyst for me wanting to write down the book in a way that other people may be able to understand their own experience by reading someone else's.
Yeah, no, that's actually, it's how the book is written as well. It's written as you are, as though you were talking to somebody, which is, it's really lively to read it. That's great, Drew. Really appreciate you talking about that. And I suppose when it comes to the people that you think would most benefit from the book, who did you think the book would, who did you have in your head, I suppose, when you were writing your book?
Well, I realized that our national press is written at the tabloids.
Yeah.
Written for about a 12-year-old person.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that till I looked into it. And the Telegraph and Guardian, maybe it's for about a 15-year-old. Yeah. So I realized these are often, people say pain is complex and complicated. I think it's quite a simple message. Pain is just a signal for you to attend to yourself. If that's misinterpreted and you use emotional responses for that, which is totally understandable, it does become complicated. And so I think that I have 4 children, but the youngest is 13. At the time of writing the book, he was 11 or 12. So I present the ideas to him. How does this sound, Sam? What do you think? Yeah, I get it. So I'd rewrite chapters until he got it.
So
conceptually, it's understandable.
Yeah.
You can accept or reject ideas at that age.
That's really, really helpful. That's really, really helpful, because what you're saying there is that you've written it as an accessible read.
that's what I felt it needed to be. A lot of books, and they all have the place, academic, intellectualized, and sometimes people argue about who knows the most.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a patient just wants to know what's the meaning behind their pain, and what's the meaning? What's the meaning? What is it? That 1 hour with them to listen to their story, and if the patient is open, and the patient has to step through the door, they have to open the book. They've got to listen initially, be open, but they've got to be listened to.
Yeah.
Well, listened to. So once they can tell their story in a way that is authentic, sometimes just telling the story means it's clear as a bell what it is that went wrong and where it went wrong. Sometimes you have to just say, is that what you believe? Yeah, well, that actually might not be as true as you think. What do you mean? Well, and you don't have to throw big facts at people. You just look at the logic of the belief, and once you see the belief change, and remember, a belief underpins all habitual behaviors, all of them. That's the belief that justifies the existence of the behaviors to get the reward of the routine that's taken out once the cue arrives. Then if the belief changes, the rest falls apart like a house of cards. So that's where belief change can, in one person, it's gone in a moment, and in someone else, well, we only have to look on the news, we'll find people who kill each other for their beliefs. So I think that's the difference between the momentary change and the one that takes ages, because that belief shift isn't always easy for any of us. Ask someone to park in a different car parking space on the way to work. Watch them wriggle. It's that resistance is present in kind of tenfold, hundredfold with persistent pain.
Yeah, one of my favorite exercises is one my colleague asked we had students, and it was brush your teeth with the other hand.
Yeah.
Nigh impossible, Drew, nigh impossible. So yeah, no, you're onto something there. I'd like to bring in Geoff now, because I understand that Geoff has really engaged with a lot of the concepts that you're talking about just now, and I'd be really keen to hear, Geoff, how did you kind of find Drew's approach to managing your pain, and what have you gained from it?
I think the first thing to say is, before COVID, I was going to a physio because I had pain in my knees, and I was coming home in more pain than I went most times I went with it. And I was thinking, I'm not sure about this. You know, I didn't see any improvement week to week. And to be honest, it was positive when I couldn't go for COVID because I wasn't getting any more pain piled on me. So about 3 months ago, I think it was 3 months ago, I randomly picked a physio practice out of the telephone book, and I ended up with our friend here. And I think two things. One thing to say, I'm an engineer by background. I've got quite an inquiring mind. So I tend to ask questions and things like that. He's laughing, but I do tend to ask questions. And I was really surprised by the approach. We had a chat and we talked, and I like chatting and talking. Part of me. And he put me on the bed, and it says, well, he talked about the knees, and I had pain, and tried my hips out. He says, your hips are fine, and put my knees up and pushed me back one side. And I've got on the right hip, I have this pain, right? It's actually 4 years ago tomorrow that I got the pain. I was on a cycle ride in Dubai and I crashed and came off the bike. And I've had pain in my hip ever since. to the extent that I couldn't sleep on my right-hand side at night. And every time I felt the pain, I thought about this cycle ride where I was wanting to average 20 mile an hour over 100 kilometers and missed it because I hit the bump and came off the bike. And it was quite interesting. He just started talking and moving my legs side to side. How's the pain now? Oh, I can't. It's a lot better. All right. And I went out of that session without the pain, and I've never had it to this day. I can sleep on my right hand side, whatever. So there was no physical, but I'm sure it was out of the really annoyance of myself that I crashed my bike at a crucial part of this ride, and that's gone, and the pain went. That was it.
Yeah.
Now,
So,
sorry, go on.
so in your experience, it was the memory that of the, you know, is that getting hooked into the annoyance?
Yeah, when I went back, I said to Drew the next week, I said, I understand where you're coming from. Sort of from a Christian perspective, the Hebrew view is the mind, the will, and the emotions, the spirit and the body are all interlinked. They all affect each other. So I've always understood that. So when he started talking, it wasn't a new concept to me. I already sort of understand that from that point of view. So I went back and I said, it's gone. You know, this was like the first session, was it, Drew? A second session or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. You didn't come with that originally, but yeah, it was pretty quick.
It wasn't what I came for. I came from my knees. But I went home able to sleep on my right-hand side, which was quite a thing. So it developed. It developed from there, and it was just gave me some exercises to do, and it was like, if you get pain, stop. But I was used to, if you're not getting pain, it's not getting better. You know, you need to push through the pain. So it's very much that was part of it. And then the next one, I went and I had pain in my left knee, right? And he said, well, you know, you've got arthritis. And I said, do I need an operation to get rid, you know? And he says, well, I don't think so. Your knees are the same. Your left knee's got pain, your right knee hasn't. What's the issue? You know, and if I can describe what he did, he does talk. I've got to say that. He does talk. He doesn't shout at you, he just talks, you know. But as I say, I'm open to that. And he sat me on the edge of the bed, and he lifted my leg, and I got the pain. And he says, right, now shut your eyes. Right, now imagine I'm lifting your leg. Have you got any pain? I said, no. So then he said, right, open your eyes, let me lift the leg. He lifted the leg and there was no pain, you know. And it was like, this is interesting, this. It gets my mind going, you know. And it seems like magic, but there is definitely an association between what you think, what you're expecting. I've been expecting pain in my knee, I'm sure of that. I'm sure that was part of it.
Yeah.
So even with my eyes shut and out of it, you know, it came. And so the last time I went was about 2 weeks ago. And he said, I don't want to see you again, just do the exercises. And I'm thinking, right, I've been sacked, you know. It's got his money out of me, sort of thing. But I'll be honest, right, I don't have any pain. I don't have any pain in my knees. I don't have any pain in my hip, right? I've got stiffness, which I'm working on with exercises and stuff like that, and it's definitely improving. But in 4 sessions, I'm sure some of it is I understood where he was coming from.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I understood the thinking behind it. And it wasn't like, I'm sure some people go, wow, I can't get my head around that. other people need persuading, but I was probably in the block that really didn't need persuading because I understood it. I hadn't read the book. I bought the book after it had happened. I mean, I hadn't read the book or anything. So for me, as I said, I'm in no pain now, right? And I was in quite a lot of pain. I can sleep at night on my right-hand side, no problem. 4 years ago, tomorrow, I fell off my bike, right? So it's an anniversary I'll get to the 4th anniversary, and for the first time, I'll have no pain. So it is definitely in your thinking, you know, I'm sure I was expecting to get pain in my knees, right? It's almost, you get conditioned to it and you expect it. And from my point of view, I don't expect it now.
What a wonderful outcome, Geoff.
No, I don't know whether I'm one of, you know, whether I'm nothing special, but I did understand where he was coming from. And I'm as good chatter as he is as well.
You were well matched, so. And that's, I think that's, thank you so much for sharing that, Geoff, because that's such a lovely recovery story and so hopeful as well, I think, for lots of people. And it's, to be honest, Geoff, it's really hard for somebody to get their head around. It might be my beliefs and it might be my memories or my thoughts that are getting in the way of me recovering and moving on. And the fact that you've really taken that on board, and it's been a really great outcome for you, but that takes a huge amount of work, Geoff.
Yeah.
And it's clear you worked really well with Drew.
Yeah, I have a wife who has a lot of pain from arthritis. I said to Drew, I need to send my wife to see you. And he says, no. She needs to decide to come and see me.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, now how I ended up with him was by accident, unless you don't believe in accidents. So, yeah, so you've got to be willing to go with it, I think. I think that's one of the keys. You know, we conditioned the other. I was conditioned, if the physio ain't putting me through pain, I'm not going to get any better. But that didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's and I think a lot of people can relate to that, is, you know, taking a I suppose physiotherapy is a profession, not a treatment. So it's there's lots of different ways of approaching you know, looking after somebody who's experiencing pain and having difficulty with their function. And this approach seems to have really benefited you, and it's so wonderful to see it. I suppose just, you know, from that kind of perspective, you know, the book is called The Pain Habit. Do you feel like pain had become a habit for you?
I think I've become, if you mean by a habit, you're expecting to get it.
Yeah.
I think the answer to that would have been yes. Although I didn't want it.
Yeah.
I didn't want it, but I think probably the answer to that is yes.
Yeah. I would agree with you there. I don't think anyone wants the pain, but it can become an expectation. And it seems like Drew was able to get into that space between you and the response to that would create the pain.
Yes. Yeah.
Really great. That's a wonderful story.
It's not invasive.
No.
It's not invasive. It's not going into the inner recesses of your mind or anything like that. It was just reassurance and general. Yeah, it's not invasive. No.
That and actually that's really helpful to know as well, because I think that's an important part, isn't it? When you're going to see somebody, it's important that you feel safe, and not that somebody's going to go poking around your mind.
Well,
for want
I
of a
was just
better
going to
word.
say, I've never been to a therapist, but it definitely wasn't like going to see a therapist.
Okay. That's it's, I suppose, Drew, if you want to come back in there, you know, it's it does seem that you're encouraging people to look at what's happening before, during, and after they do a painful movement. Is that right?
Yeah, but you go back to the origin of that pain. What else was going on in your life for about 2 or 3 months before you felt the pain? Now, trauma could have occurred. So we look at the event itself, and if there's structural injuries, which can be hard to believe, but the tissue heals within 3 months. Doesn't mean the pain should go within 3 months. Ideally, it does. But if it doesn't, there's something interfering with the normal recovery process. And it's not something wrong with the person. They're using strategies that are automated, that are encoded long before they had conscious thought, to overcome the pain, to push through it, to fight it, to beat it. But that's happening at a time that the body should be recovering either from the physical trauma that's happened or the emotional overload that they're in at the time to feel the pain. Now, if you haven't been taught the skills of care and love and boundary setting and being listened to and kind of compassion, there's a risk. There's a risk in that moment, and it can happen to any of us. I always think we're 3 months away from the person that we give a pound to, who sat outside Greg's with I think we're 3 months away from it, because we need connection with other people that we love and give us the things that we can't get from ourselves. You have to draw from yourself too, though, and that comes from resilience that is learned in childhood. Either we develop an over-resilience, that I'm okay, I don't need to have your emotions blocked because I get my own, and this I'll prove to you. And the behaviors that are the coping strategies of childhood become the traits that create the success in your life. You know, the drive to prove you something more than you felt you were, and that being measured with success, if it's money or it's clinics or it's cars. Those things are just ethereal. They give you pleasure in the moment, and as soon as you've got them, you go again. If they're some of the traits, you're lucky if you've got those traits, because some unlucky people, their addictions to regain that feeling come from sex, drugs, alcohol, shopping, gambling, working really hard and sport really hard. Work and sport are rewarded in society. But listen, there's destructors of drugs and alcohol and sex and shopping. They're all pleasurable. You're all like a little tipple of whatever your tipple is. But if in that moment of stress, you overuse any of your default behaviors to make you feel good, and they're always the quickest, and they're all always adrenaline based, you are getting a bucket of adrenaline and pour it on a system that's full of adrenaline already. That is only going in one place. It's only going in one way. And the system regulates the amount and triggers pain because it has no other warning system left. The experience of that as an organism is unpleasant. And what's the behavior you use to get out of that unpleasant sensation? The one that took you there in the first place. And that's the cycle that we could all fall into. So it's in this blame society we live in, and you know, it's in your mind. I mean, that's the best way to alienate anyone. Blushing isn't in your mind. Crying isn't in your mind. Butterflies isn't in your mind. Sexual arousal isn't in your mind. It actually occurs quicker than you've consciously realized it. Yeah. When you say I'm sweating, you're already sweating. So we have to understand that there's a system underneath this that is actually so fast. It's already playing out the expectations before we've become aware of it. And if what it presents to us appears dangerous, and we don't acknowledge that at all, or agree with that sense of danger when it isn't a sense of danger in the moment, we're misinterpreting the signal. And it takes rationale in that moment to say, actually, no, this sensation I've got is just me being nervous before a presentation to a few people on a webinar. If I really allowed that sensation to overcome, I'd say, no, Claire, I can't do it. I feel all scared and I've got a poorly tummy. It isn't. It's my body saying, Drew, are you sure you want to do this? Deep breath. Hang on in there. Claire's nice. Geoff's had a few laughs for you. I know Geoff. He's all right. I recognise Louise. I feel a bit more comfortable. I'll get through it. I'll use healthy metabolic kind of mechanisms to bring myself down. I'll hug my kids. I'll tell my wife I love her. I'll have a glass of water, maybe a beer. It's a balanced approach to coming down from something that's really exciting but a little bit stressful, and it's easy to do it because I'm quite rational at the moment, but there's plenty of times in my life I haven't been, and that's the bit where we can all go off the rails, and pain is just trying to bring us back to the point of some self-regulation. It's our last chance warning, because beyond that, it's real trouble.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if that resonates with you, please go ahead and give Drew's book a chance, because where you've written about that in the book as well, Drew, really leapt out on me on the page. It really resonated. So it's clear how passionate you are about this and how much you're rooting for other people's recovery. Thank you so much for sharing that. Louise, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thanks, Claire. Nice to meet you finally, Drew.
Hi, Louise. Yeah, nice to meet you too.
One of the things that really resonated for me, and I think other people will find it as well, is the chapter 4, Memory of Smelly Margaret from Darlington. I really liked that explanation because it made sense, and I think we can all relate to that. So I don't know if everybody's familiar with the book already, or if you want to speak a little bit about that.
So in general, because this is book plug, we don't require anyone to have read the book already. So
right, of course,
please, Drew, if you could talk to us about Smelly Margaret. That's a special request from Louise.
Do you want me to read a little tiny bit or not?
That would be lovely. We'd really appreciate that, Drew.
Okay. Chapter 4, Margaret. I'm going to take my glasses off, just because I'm of an age where maybe it's a belief system. You get to this age and your eyes go, but I haven't worked out a way of overcoming that belief yet. Smelly Margaret from Darlington. It's a memory. Do you remember Smelly Margaret from Darlington? Of course you don't. There is no Smelly Margaret from Darlington. Imagine I was trying to remind you about her. If I knew she was someone that you knew in the past, but you just couldn't recall her, I'd use cues to bring a memory back, and I'd use anything I could find to trigger a memory. Do you know Margaret from Darlington? We were at college together, 2005. We had loads of great nights out at the Ritzy nightclub. Big girl, lovely smile, blue eyes, dirty laugh. Now, all of these cues may not hit the mark enough to trigger your memory, but if I was certain you knew her, I'd persist. Margaret, you do know her. She worked in the fish shop on North Road. That one extra trigger makes a difference. Ah, you mean Smelly Margaret? Of course I remember Smelly Margaret from Darlington. She was Sheila's friend who worked in the betting shop. The memories flood back about Margaret, but so do the emotions. You might smile, laugh, feel warm at remembering the good times you had, or even a little sadness for losing touch with her. The fish shop was the catalyst to access all the other associated memories and feelings. And once the memory of nerve pathway in your brain for Smelly Margaret fires, all the associated things linked to her have more potential to come to life. There's no point in holding this information in our conscious mind. It becomes unconscious to us until we sense sufficient cues to recall that person, time, or event. When we do, we have the potential to feel the emotions linked to that memory. Memories and emotions are recalled through being tagged with other associated things to help bring those memories to life. Once enough of those tags are triggered, the pathway fires. Small cells in your brain that make up those nerve pathways are called neurons, and lots of neurons form a neurotag, which is a circuit that fires when there's output from the brain. So I used that really to because we've all had those conversations, all of us, and bang, the person that you actually trigger the memory and remembers more things than you did about the thing you were trying to remind them of. And pain is the same concept. Once a certain number of cues, and the cues can be so subtle and intertwined that we sometimes it's a smell, sometimes it's a song, sometimes it's driving past a roundabout where there's a crash, sometimes it's seeing a person you haven't seen for years, and there's a physiological response with some of the memories where the emotion that ties all those cues together is intense, and that's where a habit to remember that is a really high emotional charge on one moment. And people talk about habit changes needing repetition. Well, that isn't actually true. Look at the literature, you'll find some support for that, but actually look at the literature a little bit more deeply and you'll find habit can change in one moment. If the emotional charge in the opposite direction is so huge, that's the shift that kind of creates that epiphany change. I read a book and I felt great. I spoke to someone and pain went. Because there's lots of cues to it, sometimes you almost have to chip at each of the cues and the beliefs behind them. But sometimes when you actually get the emotion that attaches all the cues together and start to change that, that's when almost the magic happens. But because it's emotion, because the emotion creates the quickest way for someone to feel better, and it keeps the organism safe, the organism doesn't want to let that go. So investing in a new behavior with a new emotional charge, almost using the dopamine system to do it. So you reward yourself for this tiny 2-minute routine as you have a bath, and it might be thinking differently, breathing differently, moving differently, or a different emotional expression. And just for 2 minutes means you can spend 20 hours, 58 minutes doing as you've always done, but simply committing 2 minutes. And if you get good, sorry, go on.
So does that mean, so if you're working with somebody, does that mean that you try to access different emotions through new behaviors, or would you directly address the beliefs through talking about their thoughts or their memories?
I go where they feel the safest.
Grant.
The child that's injured who runs to us with an emotional pain or a physical pain, it's the same physiological response. 3 or 4-year-old child that runs to you with a grazed arm, or there's someone stolen the toy. They think they're going to die from the blood or the distress of someone stealing their toy. The thoughts are catastrophic. The breathing pattern is sympathetic, like in fight or flight. The physical element is a guarded elbow or a distressed face. There's a physical representation of that, and the emotional name for that in its base kind of concept is fear. It can be lots of variations, but it's fear. So what happens with that experience within 5 minutes of somebody who's recognized the same experience and knows they're going to survive it? Well, they'll tell the child some different thoughts. They'll slow the child's breathing down, take a few deep breaths. They'll look at the physical element, and because there's an element of trust and belief, the child has been told lies like Man in the Moon and Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus. They are lies. I'm sorry if I've shattered anyone's illusion, but the little white ones. And that means that the child will take a chance on that movement and just keep it small. So the thoughts are different, the breathing's different, the movement's different, and each one helps the other. And 3's not enough. The 4th one has to be the emotional charge. That it can all be calm, but the situation and the context the person's in is still potentially fearful. Now, the parent, being the kind parent, takes the child back to the moment it happened. Back on your bike. Come on, let's go and see your friend. That's scary to the child. No, I don't want to go back. I'm not getting my bike. Oh, you are. Come on, you can do it. I'll hold you. And it means that as they're helped in that moment, it's not because we don't think the tissue will heal or because the event never happened. It's because we don't want the emotional charge to stay attached and link all those cues that are currently present. And within 5 minutes, shout the child and ask how they are. The child's riding the bike with blood coming down the arm and says, "You kissed it better." and the children that were fighting are friends. And there is no pain. There is no pain. Now, I'll give you a really simple analogy, but all that our medical systems do is simply provide us that reassurance and the medical treatment to provide that support, physically, emotionally, in a protocol-based situation, to make sure that the person looks after themselves when they're not under the care of the medical practitioner. And essentially that's resilience, following the rules of nature to allow yourself a period of recovery so that you can learn from what's happened. There's no need to blame. There's responsibility to be accepted by the person who's pushed and the person who's fallen, but just responsibility, that's all. It's natural to have the emotions of those events and to recover from that, but to stay attached to the emotion, to maintain the attachment to all those cues, it's the recipe for persistent pain.
Yeah.
So Margaret is a lovely way to kind of say, can you see now, if I never mentioned her name again, and in the first 10 seconds I say, I know a lady from Darlington who's smelly, what's the first name that comes to mind? You won't be able to think of anything else. Now, in an hour, it'll drift. And tomorrow morning, if I said, when you boil the kettle, don't think of the smelly woman from Darlington, what her name is, it'll be quite hard not to think of that lady's name. Imagine that was someone who'd hit you or attacked you, and that was repeated for 90 days. You'd remember Margaret for the rest of your life. And you'd only need smelly and Darlington to prompt you. It's an output from the brain as real as if you're there in the moment.
Oh, Drew, if you meet me in a couple of years' time and ask me about the smelly woman from Darlington, I'll be able to tell you it was Margaret.
Ask Cormac. Ask Professor Cormac Ryan, who's the lady that Drew says who's smelly from Darlington. He'll laugh his head off.
Yeah, no, that's great. Right. At this point, I think it's been such a lovely discussion, Drew and Geoff. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your experience, Geoff, of Drew's care, and it gives a lot of hope, I think, and understanding for people about Drew's background and where he's coming from and the kind of approach that he has. And also, Drew, just I'd just like to ask, do you narrate the Audible the Audible book?
I narrated the introduction.
Okay. No,
I think the what's the bit the recognize, everyone acknowledge. Well, I said a kind of tearful kind of thing about to my wife and my children and my family, so I did the start in that part, and there's a bit of self-indulgence, I think, really, that. But I asked someone who had a clearer and more concise voice, a professional voice, if you like, that to do the rest.
Right.
It was very good. I loved the audio version. True.
Right.
I thought it was you for a minute, and then realized partway through, hang on, there was a different accent.
Yeah, the perfectionist in me got listened to about, I don't know, 100 voices, and I thought, which one feels like I'm listening to a little bit like me, and so yeah, I just picked a vocalist.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah. No, I think you have a lovely way of speaking. Very, very soothing. So I was just inquiring if it was your voice, but it's someone who sounds a little bit like you, which sounds
from
great.
Leeds, actually. Jeff's just got a paperback, but he's actually from Leeds, so Geoff thumbs up for him.
Great. Ideal. Right, at this point I am going to finish up the official part just now. So thank you for joining us for the Footsteps Festival Book Club with Drew Coverdale, and many thanks to Geoff for his very valuable input. Please join us again.